I've always been company friendly. Whatever is good for the company is good for everybody, right? Whatever is good for the building is good for all the residents. Some residents might feel that they might get gypped, but guess what? At the end of the day, we all have to live together. So that whole founder friendly bit, I don't know, for some reason I've never subscribed to the thought, right? And therefore my thought has always been, how can we be company friendly? What is right for the company, right? Because eventually, whether the founder is a founder, but he's also a shareholder. Now they have to decide what is good for all the stakeholders, not just for the founder. And I think this whole 2020 era or 20 to 23 era became, like, founders became demigods, and that is not reality, because then they have to understand that there is a customer who doesn't care who you are. He doesn't care whether you raised $2 billion or you raised all the money in the world, right? Eventually, I have to decide whether I'm going to buy this toffee or not.
Yeah.
And I don't care whether this toffee was has been funded by Sequoia and by every single major fund in the world. It does not taste good. That's all that he or she cares about.
Yeah.
Right? So I eventually, having your ear close to the ground, having the humility to understand the customer is the one that we have to win, and that whatever we do has to be sustainable in the long run, right? Because companies are not built for 5 or 10 years. They're built for 50, 100, 200 years. They have multiple stakeholders, and that era where the founder became a demigod just has led to a host of companies that have destroyed confidence, not just for the customer, because many of them have taken customer deposits and then run away, but they have also destroyed confidence with suppliers, because many of them have relied on what I call vendor financing, right? They take money from vendors and then they don't pay them. Now, recently, I've even heard there are cases now coming up on LinkedIn on how digital media agencies are not getting paid, right? And all of this comes from this whole notion that the founder is always right. And I don't think that is right. What are your thoughts on that?
I absolutely agree with you. I mean, see, I do believe that ultimately the fate of a company has to be decided by the founder. A VC cannot make a company.
Absolutely.
A VC can definitely break a company by being not productive or not having a healthy relationship with the founder. But our job is not necessarily to do anything but to support.
Yeah.
Having said that, if a founder wants to be there for a long run and wants to create something that leaves a mark, even if that means that they exit, but the product has to continue, you are building it for the society.
Yeah.
You have to take a look at everyone that you're carrying forward with you, whether it is your employees. Your employees are willing to work additional 15 days without salary, but they have to know why they're working for
Yeah.
it. You cannot be taking secondaries, or you cannot be taking additional reimbursements that is over and above certain caps while your employees are taking cuts on their salary. So it's ultimately, can I be that person that everybody around can at least say that this person is doing their best to ensure that they look out for as many interests as possible. Might not always be possible to look out for 100%, but that's what leadership is. Leader is someone that tries to be as fair as possible, and that is also the capital that they're raising and the capital they need to return.
And then that's why for all the points, the one point that I definitely maybe don't agree with, right, is that we don't have to always support them, the founder, right? We have to always guide them that, listen, because I think we have a very unique vantage point as VCs, because we get to see hundreds of businesses. We invest in hundreds of businesses. We invest in hundreds of stories. And you can always find those common elements that made a company successful. And you can always tell a founder, listen, 9 times out of 10, I've seen when you do this, it leads to Y, right? And thankfully, it's always the same pattern, right? I have so many conversations, that when a founder stops giving you updates, he's in trouble, right? It's a given deal, right? Very rare is it that there is something else going on in life, but usually it means I'm not meeting my numbers or something has gone wrong, and that's why I'm not giving you updates. So I think it is our responsibility to tell them, no, you cannot be taking secondaries, right? And then expect your employees to take Aesops and not feel that they're worthless, right? Or you cannot be the only one taking secondaries and not allow anybody else to take secondaries. Or you're taking an advance on your salary, and guess what? You're not paying your people any salary, or you're expensing family dinners to the company, but then expecting your people not to do the same. It always starts at the top, right? And which is why I think sometimes these conversations get a bit testy, right? Because the result of what a VC does is sometimes not immediately available, right? Sometimes when you put those structures in place, nobody likes it. Like it's like your gym trainer, right? When he starts or he or she starts working with you, you hate them, right? Because they cause all kinds of pain, right? They have to make you get out of bed. But it's about 3 to 4 months later when you really realize the value of what they have brought to the table. And I think the VC has that responsibility that yes, don't be disruptive. No one's asking you to go out and run the company, but definitely bring in the knowledge saying, listen, I've seen this 20 times before, 30 times before. I've seen this in a SaaS company. What you're doing right now with this 25% gross margin is never going to work. But I've seen VCs do the opposite, where they say 25% gross margin, don't worry, just keep scaling, just keep scaling. And the founders are realizing that you're never going to get funded unless you're a 70% gross margin business in SaaS. Because nobody cares about 25%. That's a services business. कोई product है नहीं उसके अंदर. But I've seen the opposite, and I said कि you're not being founder friendly. You're actually being founder unfriendly. And it reminds me of that fable, The Emperor's New Clothes. Have you heard of this one?
I don't recollect.
So it's about an emperor, right? And where the emperor thinks no end of himself. That he thinks that he is the best person in the whole land. So everybody around him realizes that he has a very foul temper, where if he doesn't like you, he'll chop off your head, for example. So nobody tells him the truth ever, right? And this amazing trader comes from somewhere, and the trader comes and shows the emperor that, hey, this is an amazing cloth, and only the smartest people can actually see the cloth, and there's no cloth actually, right? But the emperor believes that there is a robe that has been made for him, right? And he says that if you're smart, you can see the robe. Now the emperor is so gullible at this point, right? He believes that there is this invisible cloak that only smart people can see. So emperor goes, can anybody else see the cloak? Now nobody wants to piss off the emperor, so they say, yes, we can see it too. So emperor buys this for some ungodly amount of money, and then the emperor goes into the bathroom, takes off all his clothes and actually wears the robe, which is actually air, right? And then he starts walking out, and he's walking around like, oh my God, I'm wearing this amazing piece of cloth. And everybody in the kingdom has been instructed, whatever happens, do not tell the emperor that he's naked, right? If you can see where I'm going with this, until the emperor walks into the street and there's a little child, and he goes to his mother, isn't the emperor walking around in his underwear? And that's when the emperor really realizes what he's created for himself is a bunch of yes men, right? And eventually they're not going to tell him the reality, right? And I think the founder's job is to create that ecosystem around him or her that also has the naysayer. That listen, whatever you're saying is not right. Have you thought this thing through? It doesn't have to be the VC. If it's not the VC, find somebody else. But get someone that reminds you. It's like the Israelis have that 13th guy.
Yeah.
If 12 say yes, one has to say no, right? And if that doesn't happen, I think those ventures are the ones that veer off and start going in the wrong direction.
And they say, right, like if you look at most of the successful founders, and when they've talked about what has made them successful, it's creating that personal advisory board, where you have someone from either your family, you'd have a few of your friends, someone from the industry, all of these people who play different roles, but they tell you what is the truth, and they tell you as it is without adding anything on it.
Exactly my point. And I think that's a very important circle to have. And like I said, it could or could not have your VC in it, right? But at least for any VC out there that wants to build their career, your job is not to just go rah-rah with the founder, right? And cheer him or her as they're jumping off a cliff that, hey, you're going to fly, right? You're going to hit the ground. That's the truth. But
I also think a lot of this comes while picking. Can't do a lot more once you have already picked. But there are signals and signs that you get beforehand that as VCs we should listen to and we should sort of follow. If I may give you an example, a few months ago I had this sort of experience where informally we had told one of the founders that this would be our offer.
Right.
Informally, he or she agreed with us, but then they shopped around for 3 days and came back with another offer. Having said that, the offer that was accepted the offer that was on the table was from a particular investor, where in previous conversations it was very clear that that is not the direction that they want to go. And in my head, the first thing I'm thinking is that, okay, the difference is not much. This is still in our range we can accept. But then why is this okay when the fundamental values were different?
Correct.
And I think that those are certain, like, it's a very small example, but these are red flags that if you catch it up front, you know that if one could not hold their value at that point, then from here it's just a slippery slope.
Yeah.
And one just cannot hold the value later as well.
And that's why I think sometimes it's also important that while you want to be speedy in closing deals, it's also important to spend enough time with the founder, right? I like going out for a meal just to see how they behave, right? Or I like to just show up unannounced at their office, right? Just to see what's happening, right? Because yeah, when I'm coming or when a VC is coming, you can stage everything you want, right? But what if you just showed up randomly? Oh, I'm in the neighborhood, I'm just coming up, right? Maybe a bit rude, but guess what? We're managing other people's money. It's okay to be a little bit ingenious to figure out what it is. But you're right. I think it's these kind of small little things. Sometimes in the overzealousness to close a deal does affect us.